Hola, hola, hola. Hello, hello, hello. It is Lachelle, your narrator for Story Time. Welcome to the book Euphorium, where we get euphoric with books. The first half of Story Time, we learn a little bit, get a little bit of knowledge, and then we read some storybooks. And the second half of Story Time, we read from our selected chapter book. Hey, Velda. Hey, Alex. Which we are currently reading, The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. How about that? And it's been fun thus far. So, let's see. So, many of you that follow my stationery page have already seen these, but I wanted to share these with you. There are new designed cards on the Facebook page as well as the LachelleRené.com website. First is this holiday card. Look at that love. So here's the card. Hey, Heather. But look at that. Isn't that pretty? And then we've got this one. Look. Oh, a happy couple. And here's another. But yep. And this is one of my favorites. Oh, look at them. Talk about love. Love that one. So those are up on the website. But I wanted to tell you guys a quick little story. So, I'm in all kinds of groups on Facebook, and one of them is Black Girl Crafts group. And I posted some of these cards last night in the group and got some positive feedback. I was so excited that most people, well, everybody had very positive comments. And this one young lady said that she loved them and asked and let me know that she wrote poetry. She said, what do you use your cards for? Because I write poetry. And I said, I just use them to write letters. But if you would be interested in me putting one of your poems on one of my images, I'd love to make a card. So she sent me one of her poems, and it nearly brought me to tears. But anyway, I made a card, and I designed it a little bit different, still the threefold card, but this, and you guys got to tell me if you like it. This is the card. Look at this. This is her poem, Life in the Key of Song, and the top has the title, and then of course there's my photography, and then the poem just comes all the way down. Right? And then I put her name at the bottom. Well, I just basically cut and pasted her card, and her name was on the bottom. So, look at that. What do y'all think? I'm not going to tell you what. I absolutely love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And then, so I sent her a little video of the card that I made today. And guess what she asked me? If I would be interested in creating a line of cards for her. I was like, yeah. So I did one in purple, and then I did another one in pink color of the font. But these are so cute. Oh no. Am I frozen? Can you see me? Hold on. Okay. There we go. Heather said I was frozen. You guys okay? So, give me a heart or a thumbs up or something to let me know that you guys are okay. Heather says that I'm frozen, but Velda is commenting, so I hope we're okay. I forgot to put on Do Not Disturb, so hold on. Let me do a hold, please. Hold 1 second. Okay, there we go. Now we're on Do Not Disturb, and even though nobody really calls me. But anywho, we'll see. The author is Vivian Dixon, and she is a poet. And I'm going to send her some of these so she can have them in her hand and then determine whether or not she wants to collab and have me put more of her poetry on these cards. But I love them! Yeah. Anyhow. Alright, so that was my little announcement. I'm super excited about that. I mean, really excited. Really, really excited. Alright, and then the other young lady, Destiny, that there is a black girl named, a black young lady named Destiny that creates these graphics, and I buy them from her and put them on the card. So I'm going to send her some of my finished product, right, so she can actually feel them herself. Okay, so let's kick off the first half of story time like we always do with a little bit of Aesop. And all the cards except for the poetry cards are available on my website. Okay, so today's fable is The Wolf, the Fox, and the Ape. Ooh. A wolf accused a fox of theft, but the fox entirely denied the charge. An ape undertook to adjudge the matter between them. When each had fully stated his case, the ape pronounced this sentence: I do not think you, wolf, ever lost what you claim, and I do believe you, fox, have stolen what you so stoutly deny. The moral, according to Aesop, the dishonest, if they act honestly, get no credit. That is true. That is true. Okay, so let's do our last two honorable mentions from our Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History by Vashti Harrison book. Oh, I didn't look these up. Oh, I know this part. The first person is DJ Kool Herc. At the time, he was born in 1955, and at the time that this book was written, he was still alive. DJ Kool Herc. And he looks cool. One of the founders of hip-hop music. He developed the sound while DJing parties he threw in the Bronx, New York in the 1970s. He invented the merry-go-round technique, using two turntables to extend a song's instrumental break. That's DJ Kool Herc. And the next person we all know, Barack Obama. He was born in 1961, and he is alive today. He is the first black president of the United States. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in his first term. He helped lead the country out of the 2008 Great Recession and signed the Affordable Care Act into law, making health care available to millions more citizens. Give it up for Barack Obama. Hey, Heather. Welcome back. So those were our two honorable mentions. And let's see which bold woman in Black history is going to be our little leader for the night by Vashti Harrison. Let's see. Yesterday we read about Ida B. Wells. Ooh. Here we go. Who's that? Look at her. We are going to reread about Zora Neale Hurston. She was born in 1891 and she passed away in 1960. She was a writer, folklorist, and anthropologist. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Good to have you back. Zora's unique upbringing led her down a path of storytelling and creativity. She was raised in Eatonville, a historic town in northern Florida. Eatonville was special because in 1886 it became the first self-governed all-black city in America. It was an idyllic, nurturing environment that fostered an extreme sense of pride in its culture and traditions. As a young woman, Zora worked a number of jobs and saved up enough money to enroll at Howard University in 1918. There, she published her first story. By 1925, Zora had won awards for writing and had caught the attention of prominent black authors living in Harlem. That year, she moved to New York and continued her undergraduate degree as the first black student at the all-women's Barnard College. She worked alongside famous creatives including Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, and Elaine Locke, who were involved in the black artistic movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. They were called the New Negroes. Zora was celebrated as a writer who personified the movement and was given the nickname Queen of the Renaissance. Zora recognized the need to record African American stories, and she celebrated them long before others realized how important they would be. Her famous works included her masterpiece, Their Eyes Were Watching God, a novel inspired by her Eatonville past. In Mules and Men, her published collection of stories from North Florida, she tracked and recorded the tales that built up the rich culture of the African American South. Tell My Horse was the result of years of research and study of folklore and religion in Jamaica and Haiti. Upon her passing, the famous writer Alice Walker called her a genius of the South. Give it up for Zora Neale Hurston. Whoop, whoop. Yes. Okay, so remember I told you guys about the theme and all. So I have not pre-read this book. However, when I was searching for Hanukkah books, because Hanukkah starts on Thursday, this book came up. I'm not sure if it's about Hanukkah, but I do know that it has some Jewish qualities in it, if I'm saying that correctly. So let's see if we can get through this. I was having a little bit of trouble on my old iPad. Hello, anybody watching Story Time that would like to donate a new iPad to the book Euphorium? I'll take it. So tonight we're going to attempt to read A Hat for Mrs. Goldman, a story about knitting and love. Aww, and it's by Michelle Edwards. Hold on one second. A Hat for Mrs. Goldman. Aww. And the illustrations are by G. Brian Carras. And this book doesn't flip landscape, so you'll have to see the kind of tiny pictures. When Sophia was a tiny baby, Mrs. Goldman next door knit her a tiny baby hat to keep her warm. Aww. Now Sophia is big. Let me pull this down a little bit. There we go. And she makes the pom-poms for Mrs. Goldman's hats. Hats for the tiniest babies. Hats for small, medium, and large friends and neighbors. Mrs. Goldman taught her how. Aww. Keeping kepis warm is our mitzvah, says Mrs. Goldman, kissing the top of Sophia's head. This is your kepi, and a mitzvah is a good deed. Aww. Sophia and Mrs. Goldman bundle up to walk Mrs. Goldman's dog, Fifi. Winter is almost here. Fifi wears her dinosaur sweater. Sophia wears her fuzzy kitten hat and matching mittens. Mrs. Goldman made them all. Aww. An icy wind blows Mrs. Goldman's hair left and right. It turns her ears pink. "Where's your hat?" asked Sophia. "I gave it to Mrs. Chen," she explains. "Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be cold," worries Sophia. And there they all go, getting ready to go walk the dogs. And then there, look at her hair blowing. At home, Sophia thinks and worries again. Worries and thinks. Mrs. Goldman needs a hat. Who will knit one for her? Not Mrs. Goldman. She's too busy knitting for everyone else. Let me see if I can show you half of this page so you can see. There's, oops. Nope, not gonna, hold on. Hold, please. Let's see. There we go. Nope, still, there we go. Still doing it. Last year, Mrs. Goldman taught Sophia how to knit. "I only like making pom-poms," decided Sophia after a few days. "Knitting is hard, and it takes too long." Oh, you gotta see. Look at her trying to learn. Now, Sophia digs out the knitting bag Mrs. Goldman gave her, and the hat they started. Hold on a second. The stitches are straight and even. The soft wool smells like Mrs. Goldman's chicken soup. Sophia holds the needles and tries to remember what to do. She drops one stitch, she drops another. Still, Sophia knits on. She wants to make Mrs. Goldman the most special hat in the world. And there she is finding her knitting needles. And there she is trying to remember how to knit. The next day, when Sophia and Mrs. Goldman walk Fifi, tiny fluffs of snow fall on Mrs. Goldman's head. Her ears are bright red. Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be very cold, frets Sophia. Sophia knits after breakfast. She knits after lunch. She knits after dinner. She even knits while Mama reads her a bedtime story. But Sophia doesn't knit when she is at Mrs. Goldman's house. The hat is a surprise. Bless her heart, getting worried about Mrs. Goldman. And there she is doing all her knitting. All week, there are frosts on the windows. Let me do a do-over. All week, there's frost on the windows. One day, when they are walking Fifi, Mrs. Goldman wraps Mr. Goldman's scarf around her head like she's a mummy. A fierce wind unwraps it and flings it up high. Sophia jumps and grabs the end of the scarf. Fifi nips at the other end. Mrs. Goldman's kepi must be freezing, shivers Sophia. Sophia knits and knits and knits, faster and faster, stitch by stitch, row by row. Then Sophia sews. At last, Mrs. Goldman's hat is done. Aw, look at her knitting and knitting and knitting. Sort of. The hat is lumpy and bumpy. There are holes where there shouldn't be holes. It looks like a monster hat, thinks Sophia. Sophia turns the hat over and around, inside out. Mrs. Goldman's hat should not be a monster hat that will scare Fifi. Look at her looking at it. Sophia opens the box of hats Mrs. Goldman made her. Each one is special, but they are all too small for Sophia now, and way too small for Mrs. Goldman. Sophia looks in the hall closet. There are hats Mrs. Goldman made for Mama and Papa. She can't give her their hats. There's a scratchy old hat Sophia's abuela wore back in Mexico. Worse than Mrs. Goldman's scarf. Sophia thinks about Mrs. Goldman and the hats they make together. Your pom-poms add beauty, Mrs. Goldman always tells her. And that's mitzvah too. Sophia feels her heart grow bigger and lighter, like a balloon. She searches her room for red yarn. Red is Mrs. Goldman's favorite color. She gathers her scissors, her sewing needle, and her stack of index cards. Sophia gets busy, very busy. Look at her. When Sophia is done, Mrs. Goldman's hat is the most special hat in the world. Sophia rushes next door. Oh. Surprise! For me? Asked Mrs. Goldman. For you, answers Sophia. It's a hat, she says. Of course it is, exclaims Mrs. Goldman, and she hugs Sophia, and then she cries. What's wrong? Asks Sophia. Don't you like it? I more than like it. I love it, declares Mrs. Goldman. Gorgeous. Like Mr. Goldman's rose bushes. And you know how I love his roses. Mrs. Goldman kisses Sophia on the top of her kepi. I made it all by myself, Sophia tells her. Amazing! And will you look at these pom-poms? 1, 2, 3, 4, counts Mrs. Goldman. Sophia joins in. There are 20 pom-poms and on Mrs. Goldman's hat, each made with love. She gently puts her hat on. Oh. The next day, Sophia and Mrs. Goldman walk Fifi. Fifi wears her dinosaur sweater. Sophia wears her fuzzy kitten hat and matching mittens. Mrs. Goldman wears her Sophia hat. Her kepi is toasty warm. And that's a mitzvah. The end. Oh, that was so cute. I loved it. Oh, yay. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We did a little bit of Aesop. We did a couple of honorable mentions. Oh, man. Yeah, this is the problem with this particular app. Okay. There we go. We read about Zora Neale Hurston, writer, folklorist, and anthropologist, from our Little Leaders book, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. And oh, by the way, I did look up more books kind of like this, and I found some, but I'm waiting till Friday to order some, okay? And we read a sweet little story about knitting and love called A Hat for Mrs. Goldman by Michelle Edwards. Yes, it was very cute. All right, there you go, y'all. And that brings us to a close of the first half of story time. Woo-wee. Oh, wait. We didn't do our Black History flashcards by urban intellectuals. Who do we have today? Oh, y'all know her. Bessie Coleman. Born January 26, 1892, and she passed away April 30th, 1926. Fact number 1. She was an American civil aviator known as Queen Bess. Fact 2. First woman of African American and Native American descent to hold a pilot license, and the first American to earn an international pilot's license. Fact number 3. In 1921, she received her international pilot license in France because no flight school in America would train a colored woman. Fact number 4. Her goals were to expose her people to the world of aviation. She desired to speak to audiences, children, to inspire them to get involved in the flight industry. Fact number 5. In 1926, sadly, she fell to her death while practicing for one of her famous stunt shows. Evidence later indicated her plane may have been tampered with. And the last fact about Bessie Coleman is she was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 2006. Now, y'all remember all of these facts because we read that story about Bessie Coleman. Remember that? All right, there you go. So now we've got everything for the first half of story time all done. Okay, I'm going to put on a little holiday music here. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is time for the second half of story time where we read from our selected chapter book, and this book is The Phantom Tollbooth, which is so much fun. Norton Juster is the author. Yesterday, right? So, it just seems like I have to turn this up so loud. I put it on just like any holiday music type station on Pandora, so I don't know what'll play. Alright, so yesterday we got to Dictionopolis. And the words, oh, it's so great. It was so great. I'm not going to really do a recap. Basically, if anyone doesn't remember, you need to watch yesterday's episode of Storytime. So let's get right on into Chapter 4, Confusion in the Marketplace. Okay. yesterday when we ended, it said Milo thought this was quite the wisest thing he'd ever heard. Come, he shouted, let's see the market. It looks very exciting. Oh, thanks. Cool. I like them. So we've got 5 packs of these that we can go through. We gon' learn in the book Euphorium. Chapter 4, Confusion in the Marketplace. Indeed it was, for as they approached, Milo could see crowds of people pushing and shouting their way among the stalls, buying and selling, trading and bargaining. Huge wooden-wheeled carts streamed into the market square from the orchards, and long caravans bound for the 4 corners of the kingdom made ready to leave. Sacks and boxes were piled high, waiting to be delivered to the ships that sailed the sea of knowledge. And off to one side, a group of minstrels sang songs to the delight of those either too young or too old to engage in trade. But above all the noise and tumult of the crowd could be heard the merchants' voices loudly advertising their products. Get your fresh picked ifs, ands, and buts. Hee-yah, hee-yah, hee-yah. Nice, ripe wares and wins. Juicy, tempting words for sale. So many words and so many people. They were from every place imaginable, and some places even beyond that. And they were all busy sorting, choosing, and stuffing things into cases. As soon as one was filled, another was begun. There seemed to be no end to the bustle and activity. And here they are in the market. Milo and Tok wandered up and down the aisles, looking at the wonderful assortment of words for sale. There were short ones and easy ones for everyday use, and long and very important ones for special occasions, and even some marvelously fancy ones packed in individual gift boxes for use in royal decrees and pronouncements. Step right up, fancy, best quality words right here, announced one man in a booming voice. Step right up. What can I do for you, little boy? How about a nice bag full of pronouns? Or maybe you'd like our special assortment of names. Milo had never thought much about words before, but these looked so good that he longed to have some. Look, Tok, he cried. Aren't they wonderful? They're fine. Oh, this is the dough. They're fine, if you have something to say, replied Tok in a tired voice, for he was much more interested in finding a bone than in shopping for new words. Maybe if I buy some, I can learn how to use them, said Milo eagerly, and he began to pick through the words in the stall. Finally, he chose 3, which looked particularly good to him: quagmire, flabbergast, and upholstery. He had no idea what they meant, but they looked very grand and elegant. How much are these? He inquired. And when the man whispered the answer, he quickly put them back on the shelf and started to walk on. Why not take a few pounds of happies? Advised the salesman. They're much more practical and very useful for happy birthday, happy new year, happy days, and happy-go-lucky. I'd like that very much, Milo began, but Or perhaps you'd be interested in a package of goods. Always handing for good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and goodbye, he suggested. Milo did want to buy something, but the only money he had was the coin he needed to get back through the toll booth. And Talk, of course, had nothing but the time. "No, thank you," replied Milo. "We're just looking." And they continued on through the market. And here's the guy selling words. As they turned down the last aisle of stalls, Milo noticed a wagon that seemed different from the rest. On its side was a small, neatly lettered sign that said, "Do it yourself." And inside were 26 bins filled with all the letters of the alphabet from A to Z. "These are free for people who like to make their own words," the man in charge informed him. "You can pick any assortment you like or buy a special box complete with all the letters, punctuation marks, and a book of instructions. Here, taste an A. They're very good." Milo nibbled carefully at the letter and discovered that it was quite sweet and delicious. Just the way you'd expect an A to taste. "I knew you'd like it," laughed the letterman, popping 2 G's and an R into his mouth and letting the juice drip down his chin. Hold on. A's are one of our most popular letters. All of them aren't that good. Hold on. Okay, sorry, y'all. A's are one of our most popular letters. All of them aren't that good, he confided in a low voice. Take the Z, for instance. Very dry and sawdusty. And the X? Why, it tastes like a trunk full of stale air. That's why people hardly ever use them. But most of the others are quite tasty. Try some more." He gave Milo an I, which was icy and refreshing, and took a crisp, and Talk a crisp, crunchy C. "Most people are just too lazy to make their own words," he continued, "but it's much more fun." "Is it difficult? I'm not much good at making words," admitted Milo, spitting the pits from a P. "Perhaps I can be of some assistance. ASSISTANCE, buzzed an unfamiliar voice, and when Milo looked up, he saw an enormous bee, at least twice his size, sitting on top of the wagon. "I am the spelling bee," announced the spelling bee. "Don't be alarmed. ALARMED. Talk ducked under the wagon, and Milo, who was not overly fond of normal-sized bees, began to back away slowly. "I can spell anything. ANYTHING, he boasted, testing his wings. "Try me. Try me." "Can you spell goodbye?" suggested Milo as he continued to back away. The bee gently lifted himself into the air and circled lazily over Milo's head. "Perhaps Perhaps. You are under the misapprehension. Misapprehension. Nope, Ension. That I am dangerous, he said, turning a smart loop to the left. Let me assure Assure you that my intentions are peaceful. Peaceful. And with that, he settled back on top of the wagon and fanned himself with one wing. Now, he panted, think of the most difficult word you can spell, and I'll spell it. Hurry up, hurry up. And he jumped up and down impatiently. He looks friendly enough, thought Milo, not sure just how friendly a friendly bumblebee should be, and tried to think of a very difficult word. Spell vegetable, he suggested, for it was one that always troubled him at school. That is a difficult one, said the bee, winking at the letterman. Let me see now. He frowned and wiped his brow and paced slowly back and forth on top of the wagon. How much time do I have? Just 10 seconds, cried Milo excitedly. Count them off, Tuck. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, the bee repeated, continuing to pace nervously. Then, just as time ran out, he spelled as fast as he could. Vegetable. Correct, shouted the letterman, and everyone cheered. Can you spell everything? Asked Milo admiringly. Just about, replied the bee with a hint of pride in his voice. You see, years ago I was just an ordinary bee, minding my own business, smelling flowers all day, and occasionally picking up part-time work in people's bonnets. Then, one day I realized that I'd never amount to anything without an education, and being naturally adept at spelling, I decided that Boulderdash! Shouted a booming voice, and from around the wagon stepped a large beetle-like insect dressed in a lavish coat, striped pants, and checked vest, spats, and a derby hat. Let me repeat, Balderdash, he shouted again, swinging his cane and clicking his heels in midair. Come now, don't be ill-mannered. Isn't someone going to introduce me to the little boy? And here's this. This, said the bee with complete disdain, is the humbug. A very dislikable fellow. The humbug. Nonsense! Everyone loves a humbug, shouted the humbug. As I was saying to the king just the other day. You've never met the king, accused the bee angrily. Then, turning to Milo, he said, Don't believe a thing this old fraud says. Bosh! Replied the humbug. We are an old and noble family, honorable to the core. Insectus humbugium. Yes. If I may use the Latin. Why, we fought in the Crusades with Richard the Lionheart, crossed the Atlantic with Columbus, blazed trails with the pioneers, and today many members of the family hold prominent government positions throughout the world. History is full of humbugs. A very pretty speech, S-P-E-E-C-H, sneered the bee. Now, why don't you go away? I was just advising the lad of the importance of proper spelling. Bah! Said the bug, putting an arm around Milo. As soon as you learn to spell one word, they ask you to spell another. Can you never catch up? So why bother? Oh, sorry. You can never catch up, so why bother? Take my advice, my boy, and forget about it. As my great-great-great-grandfather George Washington Humbug used to say, you, sir, shouted the bee very excitedly, are an imposter. I-M-P-O-S-T-O-R, who can't even spell his own name. Here's the humbug. A slavish concern for the composition of words is the sign of a bankrupt intellect, roared the humbug, waving his cane furiously. Milo didn't have any idea what this meant, but it seemed to infuriate the spelling bee, who flew down and knocked off the humbug's hat with his wing. Be careful, shouted Milo as the bug swung his cane again, catching the bee on the foot and knocking over the box of W's. Right? It is so awesome. My foot, shouted the bee. My hat, shouted the bug, and the fight was on. The spelling bee buzzed dangerously in and out of range of the humbug's wildly swinging cane as they menaced and threatened each other, and the crowd stepped back out of danger. Whew. Okay, we gotta do we like this one. Okay. There must be some other way to, began Milo, and then he yelled, Watch out! But it was too late. There was a tremendous crash as the humbug in his great fury tripped into one of the stalls. Oh, here they are fighting. Okay, hold on. Okay, there was a tremendous crash as the humbug, in his great fury, tripped into one of the stalls, knocking it into another, then another, then another, then another, until every stall in the marketplace had been upset, and the words lay scrambled in great confusion all over the square. The bee, who had tangled himself in some bunting, toppled to the ground, knocking Milo over on top of him, and lay there shouting, Help! Help! There's a little boy on me! The bug sprawled untidily on a mound of squashed letters, and Tock, his alarm ringing persistently, was buried under a pile of words. Oh no! Time check. Let's see. I don't know if we can do this. I don't think we can do this in 10 minutes, so let's just see how far we can go. Chapter 5, Short Shrift. Done what you've looked. Done. Wait a minute. Done what you've looked, angrily shouted one of the salesmen. He meant to say, look what you've done. But the words had gotten so hopelessly mixed up that no one could make any sense at all. "Do going to we what are," complained another, as everyone set about straightening things up as well as they could. For several minutes, no one spoke an understandable sentence, which added greatly to the confusion. As soon as possible, however, the stalls were righted and the words swept into one large pile for sorting. The spelling bee, who was quite upset by the whole affair, had flown off in a huff, and just as Milo got to his feet, the entire police force of Dictionopolis appeared, loudly blowing his whistle. "Now we'll get to the bottom of this," he heard someone say. "Here comes Officer Shrift." Striding across the square was the shortest policeman Milo had ever seen. He was scarcely 2 feet tall and almost twice as wide, and he wore a blue uniform with white belt and gloves, a peaked cap, and a very fierce expression. He continued blowing the whistle until his face was beet red, stopping only long enough to shout, "You're guilty! You're guilty!" Oops, sorry, y'all. At everyone he passed. "I've never seen anyone so guilty," he said as he reached Milo. Then, turning towards Tock, who was still ringing loudly, he said, "Turn off that dog! It's disrespectful to sound your alarm in the presence of a policeman." He made a careful note of that in his black book and strode up and down, his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the wreckage in the marketplace. "Very pretty, very pretty," he scowled. "Who's responsible for all this? Speak up, or I'll arrest the lot of you." There was a long silence. Since hardly anybody had actually seen what had happened, no one spoke. "You!" said the policeman, pointing an accusing finger at the humbug, who was brushing himself off and straightening his hat. "You look suspicious to me." The startled humbug dropped his cane and nervously replied, "Let me reassure you, sir, on my honor as a gentleman, that I was merely an innocent bystander, minding my own business, enjoying the stimulating sights and sounds of the world of commerce, when this young lad—" "Aha!" interrupted Officer Shrift, making another note in his little book. "Just as I thought. Boys are the cause of everything." And here they are. Look at him. Boys are the cause of everything. "Pardon me," insisted the humbug, "but I in no way meant to imply that—" "Silence!" thundered the policeman, pulling himself up to a full height and glaring menacingly at the terrified bug. "And now," he continued, speaking to Milo, "where were you on the night of July 27th? "What does that have to do with it?" asked Milo. "It's my birthday, that's what," said the policeman as he entered. "Forgot my birthday" in his little book. Boys always forget other people's birthdays. "You have committed the following crimes," he continued: "having a dog with an unauthorized alarm, sowing confusion, upsetting the apple cart, wreaking havoc, and mincing words." Now see here," growled Tock angrily. "And illegal barking," he added, frowning at the watchdog. "It's against the law to bark without using the barking meter. Are you ready to be sentenced?" "Only a judge can sentence you," said Milo, who remembered reading that in one of his school books. "Good point," replied the policeman, taking off his cap and putting on a long black robe. "I'm also the judge. Now, would you like a long or short sentence?" "A short one, if you please," said Milo. "Good," said the judge, rapping his gravel 3 times. "I always have trouble remembering the long ones. How about, 'I am'? That's the shortest sentence I know." Everyone agreed that it was a very fair sentence, and the judge continued. "There will also be a small additional penalty of 6 million years in prison. Case closed," he pronounced, rapping his gavel again. "Come with me. I'll take you to the dungeon." "Only a jailer can put you in prison," offered Milo, quoting the same book. "Good point," said the judge, removing his robe and taking out a large bunch of keys. "I'm also the jailer." And with that, he led them away. "Keep your chin up," shouted the humbug. "Maybe they'll take 1 million years off for good behavior." The heavy prison door swung back slowly, and Milo and Tock followed Officer Shrift down a long, dark corridor lit by only an occasional flickering candle. "Watch the steps," advised the policeman as he started down a steep circular staircase. The air was dank and musty, like the smell of wet blankets, and the massive stone walls were slimy to the touch. Down and down they went until they arrived at another door even heavier and stronger looking than the first. A cobweb brushed across Milo's face, and he shuddered. "You'll find it quite pleasant here," chuckled the policeman as he slid the bolt back and pushed the door open with a screech and a squeak. "Not much company, but you can always chat with the witch." "The witch?" trembled Milo. "Yes, she's been here for a long time," he said, starting along another corridor. Let's see. Yeah. We're going to stop there, and here they go. Down to the dungeon. So we'll stop there at the mention of a witch. And then we'll finish chapter 5 tomorrow. Okay? Since it is 8:00. I don't know what I did with my bookmark. But I've got plenty of cards here. There you go. This book is so much fun. I love it. Y'all know I love words. So, it's fun. A short sentence or a long sentence. I like the short one. I am. That's a pretty short sentence. Oh, thank you, Zandra, for recommending this book. All right, friends, I'm going to head out for the evening. Well, not really head out. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go over there and do some stuff. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. And thank you all again for joining Story Time. I love having y'all over. I will see you guys tomorrow, and we will continue with the Phantom Tollbooth. All right, friends, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Ciao.